Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar entitled What Could Be the Future of Culture Meat? This webinar is organized by the European Federation of Animal Science. Myself, I am Jean-François Hocquette, President of the French Society for Animal Production, which is a member of EAAP. It's a great honor and a great pleasure for me to chair this webinar. So this webinar is organized by the EAAP, the European Federation of Animal Science, and more precisely on the next slide, you can see that it is organized by the EAAP Cattle Study Commission. I am myself a secretary of the EAAP Cattle Study Commission, and I was also, until last year, president of this commission. You can see in this commission the different members from different countries, and the Cattle Commission of EAAP is highly involved in different activities, including the organization of the EAAP annual meeting. On the next slide, you can see the number of sessions and organized by EAAP last year in Davos at the annual meeting. So we had 74 different sessions with more than 1,000 abstracts which were accepted, and the Cattle Commission was involved in about 1/5 of these sessions, managing about 1/5 of these abstracts. So you are invited to participate each year at the EAAP annual meeting. On the next slide, it's indicated that in Lyon from August 27 to 31, there will be the joint EAAP annual meeting and the WEAP Congress on Animal Science. So it means that there will be 2 scientific meetings at the same time. First, the EAAP annual meeting, and then the Congress on Animal Science organized by the World Association for Animal Production. So we expect more than 1,500 people. It will be an hybrid Congress as well, with possibility to participate online at this meeting. So it's a great pleasure for me today to have organized this webinar and to welcome you to discuss culture meat. So on the next 2 slides, I will just summarize the topic. According to some proponents of culture meat might be the meat of the future. The principle to produce culture meat is the following. We take a muscle biopsy, a tissue sample from a cow, from a pig, from a chicken, and then it's possible to extract stem cells or myoblasts from this tissue sample, and then the cells are able to proliferate a lot at a high rate to produce a huge amount of muscle fibers. And this will be done in a huge bioreactor. At the end, it's possible to collect all these muscle fibers and to color them, mince them, mix them with fats, and shape into burgers. So using this principle, it might be possible to produce huge amount of meat or muscle fibers to provide enough meat to the increasing human population. And this new technology is advertised in the public media, as you can see on the next slide. And you have here some examples of articles in the press media, mainly in the French media. And sometimes the articles are very positive, or sometimes the articles are a little bit critical. Anyway, today we will discuss this topic. On the next slide, you will see the program of the webinar. There will be a first talk by Professor Federica Cheli and her colleague Carlotta Giromini from University of Milan. Professor Cheli is a professor in animal nutrition, and this talk will be entitled Culture Meat and Food Safety. And of course, safety is something very important in the food sector. So we should be sure first that culture meat might be safe for food consumption if it should be developed in the future. The second talk will be given by Professor Daniele Asioli from University of Reading. So Daniele is expert in consumer studies. He works in the Department of Agri-Food Economics and Marketing, School of Agriculture Policy and Development of University of Reading. His talk is entitled Consumer Valuation for Culture Meat, Findings from the European Union and the United States. Indeed, something which is very important is potential consumer acceptance of culture meat, because if consumers do not accept culture meat, there might be, of course, a problem for proponents of culture meat. So this will be discussed in this talk. And finally, after a short break, I will summarize a workshop which was held last November 18, 2021. And this workshop was organized by the French Academy of Agriculture, the French Veterinary Academy, the French Society of Nutrition, and the French Association of Animal Science. So I will summarize with my co-authors the outcomes of this workshop. And my talk will be entitled Culture Meat, is it possible? Is it good? Is it acceptable? After each talk, there will be 10 minutes of question and answers. So on the last slide, you will see some issues about organization of this webinar. The webinar will be recorded and further available on the EAAP website members restricted area. So again, you will have the possibility to express yourself and to ask questions to the different speakers using the Q&A button. I would like to advertise the next EAAP webinar, which will be on genotype solutions. It will be held on March 15. So please look at the EAAP website and social media to be informed of the last news from EAAP. So now it's a great pleasure for me to introduce the first speaker, Professor Federica Cheli. Okay, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And the presentation is shared with Carlotta Giromini, so I moved to another place in order to share the screen. Now I will try to I hope you can see the presentation. So first of all, I would like to thank the European Federation of Animal Science, the organizer, for inviting Dr. Giromini and me to join this topic join this webinar, sorry, on a very hot topic. And of course, cultured meat can be, in order to give an answer to the question of the title of the webinar, we must consider a lot of aspects. And in our presentation, we focused on problems of food safety in terms of research priorities, needs, and future challenges. It is well known that meat is a word, And worldwide, we have a lot of definition from governmental agency or international organization and from textbook regarding what we how we define meat. And all of these definition include the terms parts of animal, and EFSA and also FAO definition include also the word safe. So underlining the need and the important topic of the safety of food that we are going to put on the market. Whether or not cultured meat can be considered or can be included in this definition, parts of animal, is not very clear. For sure, meat analogs, which include maybe part of plants or fungi, cannot be defined meat. Therefore, the first requirements we need is to understand and to define what is cultured meat. Sometimes we talk in vitro meat, cruelty-free meat, and so on. And we need the standardization, and they need a precise definition of meat. And the precise nomenclature is important not only for consumers in order to avoid the mislabeling, but also for a legislative approach. Before moving to cultured meat, I would like to remember something that most of us know very well regarding meat, with a particular focus of beef meat. Meat is not only protein, but in meat we have a lot of other constituents and molecules with the bioactive activity, constituents and nutrients which are characterized of a high availability. Meat is not only muscle or some other mesenchymal tissues, but meat is an end product of a process that include the maturation inside the animal up to the end of the aging process before meat is put on the market. The second point we know very well that is that ruminant livestock contributes to sustainable food and nutritional system. Sustainability is one of the keywords for cultured meat. And we know very well that ruminants are able to transform inedible biomass into high valued protein edible output. And last but not least, a lot of studies and researches has been carried out in order to improve meat quality, to improve animal welfare, and to improve sustainability of conventional meat production and to reduce environmental impact. This is thank you to the studies and the application in animal farming and feeding of a lot of innovation technologies. The today's scenario is this one. We are a growing population. We may reach 10 billion people in 2050 or 2100. And therefore, not only sustainability and food safety are keywords, but also we have to consider food security. In terms of meat and demand of meat, so we can see some decrease of meat consumption in some countries of the world. The global demand is going to increase. Global demand of meat of different sources. Anyway, if you are more involved in studies and research for conventional meat or cultural meat, we have to face the same, we have to share the same, some important topics. And the major goal is to produce sustainable food. Some livestock system can be sustainable. Cultured meat is probably, as Jean-François said, much more advertised than in the public media. We need, however, we need still have many technical, quality and safety problems that must be solved for cultured meat before it is put on the market. And maybe we need more precise LCA analysis, maybe conducted with some technical economical analysis. The main drivers of cultured meat, the main key points, keywords are innovation, technology, sustainability, animal welfare. But apart of this, we have to make several considerations regarding cultured meat. For the European Union, cultured meat is included in one of the categories of novel food. Therefore, they must be analyzed and evaluated according to the European regulation for novel food categories. Considerations: safety, nutritional safety, bioactivities, sustainability. We will not discuss in deeply this topic. And last but not least, the properties of the organoleptic properties of meat. If you have to meat, meat must be, I think, good to be eaten. Safety. First, I have to remind us that safety is a prerequisite. So therefore, no compromise on food safety. For conventional meat production, the European Union food safety system give us some support and indication regarding the quality, how to improve and how to check the quality and the safety of meat and meat products all along the system from farm to fork. So starting from farm system up to the consumption. If we apply this approach to cell cultured meat, of course, we have to start from the ingredients, cells and cell production systems, and evaluate the safety of up to the end of the process, up to the consumer. So we can start to make some considerations on the constituents of cultured meat, and these constituents are, of course, cells. We can use different cells, different approach to differentiate, as Jean-François said, the cells. And what is important that we must know very well, we have to identify the cell. We have to characterize them. We have to check all the biological material we use in cell culture meat production, and therefore evaluating cells for their stability or instability. And most of all, we have to check for safety hazards associated with the cells we are using as constituents of meat. Safety hazards like impurities, microbiological contaminations, and byproducts. Usually, people think that as the cultured meat is produced in a lab, it can be less susceptible to zoonotic diseases than conventional meat. But of course, all these aspects, all the safety hazards must be checked, controlled, and evaluated. Moving from the constituents to the production process, if you are working in a lab, of course, we have a support of protocols and standards that are provided by good cell culture practice, by good tissue practice. And therefore, we have the possibility to check for the safety or all the materials we are using for growing and replicating cells. Maybe there are some constituents of the cell culture medium that need some more attention, like maybe serum and antimicrobials. And regarding serum, Carlotta is going to give some more detailed information. Of course, safety and microbiological controls must be checked and tested throughout the manufacturing process. And what I can say that maybe we still have to evaluate and to detect, and maybe we will find some more critical point when we will move from a lab to a farm for the production of cultured meat in the scale-up process. Not only safety is a point to be addressed. I repeat, safety is a prerequisite, but we have to consider and to study and to research more regarding the nutritional safety of cultured meat. As I said, meat is not only a protein, but there are other important compounds. That in this scenario, I think that we need a more comparative approach with the conventional meat in order to evaluate the presence, the bioavailability of macro and micronutrients in cultured meat. What I can say is that cultured meat may represent a technical approach able to create and produce functional food, maybe customized or tailored for specific classes of people which have maybe different nutrient and requirements. And this, I think, is a topic that needs more and more researchers. Last, another topic, it is the organoleptic protein properties of meat. And here again, there is a word. Professor Hocquette talked about burgers, but we know that maybe there are a lot of different cuts we can introduce in our diet. Different sources of meat within the same species. We have different breeds with different quality and organoleptic properties of meat. I repeated, different cuts, different muscle composition, and therefore we need to collect and to evaluate all these aspects also for cultured meat. So we need to, maybe with possible comparative approach with conventional meat, evaluate, study and make more researches regarding texture, color, aroma, taste, tenderness, and so on. Therefore, this is why, because it is important to adopt cultured meat that to ensure not only the safety, but also to mimic in a very precise way the conventional meat. And I repeat, meat must be good to eat. In this topic, I think that it is therefore very important to find and to use an analytical approach in order to standardize the organoleptic study and obtain a standard fingerprint of cultured meat. And in this context, I think that we can take a lot of advantage maybe by the use of platforms based on electronic sense perception. Just to remember a note, in the year 2000, NASA started with a research project in order to find a new food supply for the life in space stations. And within this research, a group of SNF team were included in order to evaluate the acceptance and the organoleptic acceptance of the product. So this is very, very important. Anyway, I think that culture meat is on the market. Here on the left, you can see a receipt of a restaurant in Singapore, where customer ordered cultivated chicken beets. And on your left, you can see a research in order to create not only burgers, but maybe cuts of meat from high quality breed. And therefore, before giving the floor to Carlotta, I would like to conclude this first part saying that, underline that there are still many technical, quality and safety issues, and maybe we can suggest some new or different application of cultured meat. So therefore, Carlotta, I give you the floor and I will move. Thank you. See you soon.
So thank you very much. So basically, culture meat is on the market, and Singapore Food Agency has approved the cultivated chicken for sale almost 2 years ago. And also the Food and Drug Administration and the USDA are considering their legislation for the approval of these products in their market. So the next will be Europe. So this scenario open for sure a lot of research questions. Some of them were introduced and described very well from Prof. Cheli. I'm going back to a simplified version of the production process of culture meat. The starting point is still livestock. As you can see, the animal, the biopsy from animal. We obtain the stem cells and we need the differentiation and all the process to grow and differentiate and obtain myoblasts and then myocytes. We need to implement our technologies related to scaffolding and to the use of bioreactor or the 3D printing to obtain or to try to simulate the stick or the final product called cultivated or whatever meat. Here I just put like a key point, which are just few of the research point that we will face in the future, of course, related to this culture meat. The stem cells, the maintenance, the differentiation, and their expansion toward large scale, but also the establishment of cell line, I think is a very critical point at this point, because it will be necessary for research purpose, but also the establishment of cell line for food production is a critical and a point of interest now. Also, the scaling up of culture meat to meet the needs of industrial production. This is in the hand of big companies or actually startups which are growing on the topic, but also the optimization of cost-effective culture medium, and in particular the presence of amino acids, protein, and the serum, which is the most important, let's say, part of the culture medium, and also from a technological point of view, the scaffolding and the bioreactor and the 3D printing technologies. In the further slide, I'm going to focus on the latter 2 points. Because one of the FBS, the fetal bovine serum, is one of the most component of culture medium for growing cells. Fetal bovine serum contains a large number of nutritional and macromolecules and several growth factors which are essential for cell growth. And let's say that almost 10 to 20% of culture medium is made by serum. And of course, it represents the most prohibitive expense for scaling up culture meat at large scale. So the research is focused on sustainable alternatives to this fetal bovine serum. In this slide, I just put 3 publications which are from the last 2 months, let's say, which are focused on this topic. We are looking for alternative to fetal bovine serum to support cell growth. But there is a lot of space of research. And again, here, we are back to livestock because some of these publications underline that animal protein extract or byproducts, industrial byproducts coming from animal origin seems to be a good alternative together with plant extract or combination of that. So I think it's a very interesting point of research on this topic. Also, regarding the technology, as I previously mentioned, I was citing the topic of the 3D printing. 3D printing is one of the technology which can be used for printing food, and it can be applied to culture meat, of course. But even in this case, it's a very fascinating, in my opinion, word, because it moves a lot of research question on the topic. In example, here, I just want to underline the development of edible inks and scaffold, which should be, of course, edible, should be food grade, but also they should allow the cells to grow. And this seems a simple story, but actually it's not. And there is a lot of research behind this. And again, as you can see from these 2 publications, it seems that the whey protein or whey-based extract seems to be a good ingredient for edible inks for meat production. So again, we are back to livestock production. So these underline that this production is strictly related and is parallel to the traditional meat, probably, or the traditional livestock production, better. So this is just for give you, together with Prof. Cheli, some research input on the topic. Since it's going to be on the market, that's important to have to work on that and research on that. Of course, the application of this production should be considered. In this case, I was impressed when the European Special Agency was looking for alternative protein source and was looking for culture meat as alternative protein source. But culture meat can be also applied to personalized nutrition and tailored food, so specific at target group. And also it can find application also in the pet food, which is a growing market. It seems that in the US, there are some already products, already prepared, let's say, pet food containing cultured mouse. So altogether, our take-home messages and open questions are related to food safety, of course, which is a key point, together with environmental and biodiversity concern, which are moved and which are active and hot topic in this culture meat area. And even though the application of these products is focused on tailored food and pet food or personalized food, it can be useful for extreme production, extreme condition. Of course, it's reaching the market. And so research is needed at all the steps. And last but not least, we know that there are a lot of hybrid and vegan products on the market. We should consider, are they good or not? Are they better than synthetic meat? We don't know, and we have to look into detail this part. So we thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to both of you for this interesting talk. So we have 10 minutes of discussion, and I got on the chat 3 questions, and one is the following. Meat is important for developing countries, which is not so important for developed countries because there is enough food or enough purchase ability in developed countries. So please put your opinion about the future of culture meat in developed countries versus developing countries.
If I can start, of course, thank you for the question. It's very nice, interesting questions. I agree with you. And of course, cultured meat is associated with a high technological demands and problems and demands. And maybe as we try to focus, maybe the application of cultured meat will be on specific production, and maybe it is not still ready to respond to the need of food security. But in some extreme condition or in a particular need for nutrient requirements. I don't know if Carlotta want to add something, some other comments.
Yeah, I think it's mainly, let's say mainly a matter of cost, because of course this is a big problem of these products, apart for safety and all other concern that we move. Of course, the economical part is also a huge question mark regarding this application, for example. That's why I mentioned these specific applications, which are probably what I found the target. But
there is another question. Is there any patent on the culture meat? I think the answer is yes.
Yes, and we know that we find a lot of problems and difficulties in order to try to, because now we are working on cultured meat, but we would like to start also with comparative approach and comparative studies between cultured meat and conventional meat. But it is difficult maybe to find cultured meat for a deep evaluation and comparison of.
There is one question about the environmental impact of culture meat, but I will keep this question for later on because I will provide some information about this in my talk. There is a question about culture meat which is sold in Singapore. To my knowledge, it is sold as a chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it is different. You showed, Jean-François showed the burger. So it's different to speak about meat. It can be a burger, but maybe it could be a steak or some other cuts. And this is another problem to be solved. Maybe burger is easier to be produced.
There is an interesting question about the need to reduce antimicrobial use to produce meat and the use of antimicrobials in culture meat.
Yes, so we have of course, usually in a lab, we can use antimicrobials. Also, if we have standards and procedures that, and therefore we can maybe avoid the use of antimicrobials. And so this is possible in a lab, but I think it is a problem to question mark, as Carlotta said, maybe when the process is going to scale up. So this is another answer to question to be considered for evaluating and for the future of cultured meat. I don't know if you want to add more, something more regarding antimicrobial use in cell culture laboratory, Carlotta.
Yeah, this is a big problem. I mean, a big problem. Brings a big challenge on that. And as I told you, this is I mean, there are plenty of research questions, and of course, antimicrobial are the base of cell culture. So I don't know, it's very critical point that needs to be solved in this sense, using alternatives and whatever. But this is a critical point, sure.
Yes, in vivo we have the experience of the use and the test of different molecules or components as alternative of antimicrobial. So this could be alternatives, I think, that could be considered also for cell culture.
So there is a question about acceptability of consumers, but this will be addressed in the next talk. There is a question about fetal bovine serum. Of course, it's not ethical to use fetal bovine serum because we need to kill cows and to kill the fetuses as well. And all companies are aware of that, and they want to develop alternatives by avoiding using fetal bovine serum. There is another question about mature meat. I mean meat which has been aged, and it cannot be compared to muscle tissue, but I will discuss that in my talk after. So there is maybe two questions. I don't know if you can answer. How much time is needed to make 1 kilogram of culture meat? So this question has been asked twice. Please, if you can provide a short answer, if you know the answer.
Carlotta, do you have an answer? It depends on the cells, how much they grow and.
Yeah, it depends on the starting point, if we are working, the type of animal, the type of cells, the stage of that differentiation. But of course, there is, we have to think about, I mean, the first production were huge production to obtain a few cells. If we consider our production, we are culturing cells for other purposes. I mean, we need high gatekeep laboratory, and of course this is a very huge process. So I don't have a specific answer. I will give you once we will have we will try to produce something in the lab, but of course it's a very long and complex process.
There is a question about the role of the farmer and zootechnical engineer in the future industry. Myself, I met farmers which are completely against culture meat because they are afraid of that. And on the other side, I met some farmers who would like to develop culture meat besides their animals because they would like to be part of the future. So I think there are different opinions among farmers. I don't know if you want to add something else.
Well, I think it's an opportunity. I don't know if it will be the future. Probably not. But of course, it can be a parallel opportunity for sure for research. And I think the research needs to start from livestock and animal scientists, which have the knowledge for developing this type of production. So it's good that we have open opportunity in this site.
So the last question I will take from the chat is the following. Someone said that culture meat for like pet food, it looks like a dream because a pet food industry needs only a source of protein, nothing about texture, color, or things like that. So pet food should be very simple to produce. It's only proteins. What is your opinion about that?
But I think that also the organoleptic properties of the pet food must be considered because maybe not the color, of course, but the palatability of pet food is a very important topic. And in the picture you have seen pet food for cat, and Carlotta said it was a cultured meat from mouse. So a tailor-made cultured meat for cat.
So I think we will keep the next questions for the general discussion. So I would like to introduce now Daniele Asioli for the next talk about consumer valuation for culture meat. So please, Daniele, the floor is yours.
Can you see my slides? Is all okay?
Perfect. Maybe it could be in a full screen. It would be better.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much, Jean, for inviting me to give this talk here today to the European Federation of Animal Science for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to me. And for people that don't know me, my name is Daniele, and I'm doing research on agri-food system about understanding consumer preferences for food products and agribusiness decision making to better inform agribusiness strategy of food policy. And I am assistant professor at the Department of Agri-Food Economics and Marketing at the University of Reading in the UK. Here are my contacts if you are interested to know more about my research. So what I'm talking about today, it's a topic that has been highlighted in the previous presentation. We talk about consumers. So why we talk about consumers? Well, we know that at the end of the day, consumers are a big part, of course, of the food system. And if we would like that all the system works, meaning that we can complete the cycle, right? The cycle related to the cultured meat, we need consumer informations. Because at the end of the day, if consumer doesn't like the product, doesn't buy the product, then we fail. And we all know that there are many statistics that show that between 50–80% of the new food products that every year go in the market, they fail after 1 year. There are various reasons for that. And one of the most important reasons is that basically there is not much attention to the consumer, what the consumer wants, what are their desires, and what they are their expectation towards a certain product. And of course, cultured meat is one of these products. Firstly, we'll just give you a brief overview of the current studies that has been done around consumer preference for cultured meat. Then I will focus on 2 case studies which have been responsible for the conduction of this study about consumer willingness to pay for 2 studies. One was being carried out in Europe in 3 different countries, and one has been carried out in the United States. So, consumer preference for cultured meat. What the literature say? Well, we can see an increasing number of studies. There's a growing number of studies it's around peer review, around 40 and 50, but the number is growing quite frequently. And I also know Jean has published several papers, and we also have a paper together. And the majority has been published in the last 2 years, right, from the 2019. But this number is growing quite a lot. And what we have found that research is mainly conducted in Western countries. That's a kind of polarization of studying in this place, especially in the United States, following by United Kingdom, Netherlands, Australia, China, and Germany, and so on. So, but more and more studies are also being conducted at this time also in other countries. What we can see, what we can find, what the literature say about this topic. Well, generally we can see that the studies that has been done show that the majority of the consumer were at least willing to try cultured meat. However, when it comes to consume regularly or as a replacement of conventional meat, much less consumers are interested. Maybe some consumers are just curious to try, but maybe are not as well yet convinced to buy this product. Also because we can see that only in Singapore now is possible to purchase this product. So people don't have the possibility to taste, the people don't have the possibility to see this product and to have a personal opinion. We can see that consumer acceptance tends to increase when we provide positive information about the product and less technical information, right? If we try to explain too much how cultured meat is produced, then probably fall out in the kind of technological aspect, and people we know are quite afraid to technology on average. Also important is message framing. When you present a product, if you frame the communication in a positive way, can be a good effect on consumer acceptance. For example, you can show the benefits about the social benefits, right? Like, for example, reduce environmental impact, or the fact that we don't kill any animals, or you just can focus on personal benefits. We have seen the previous presentation about the possibility to personalize the meat, changing, for example, different nutrient composition and so on. And also good also to compare this product to conventional meat. People that are meat eaters, so when they would like to change the kind of product, for example, moving from conventional to cultured meat, if you show the similarity of conventional meat, they get probably a better sense of familiarity of this product. And so that might be willing to purchase this product more. Other findings show that acceptance can vary among different countries. It looks like that this product is much well accepted from India and China rather than US. And if we sum the population of India and China, we can see that that might be a potential big market. Generally, cultured meat appeals to younger people, to people living in the city, to higher educated consumer, males, meat eaters, and people with higher meat attachment. This is general. This is a kind of general findings, but of course there are differences, okay, among countries. There are also big findings about the consumer perception of environmental benefits of cultured meat. Some people think that this is beneficial for the environment. Other people think it is not. So that probably environmental aspect, which is probably, Jean will talk later about it, there are some ambiguities related to that. Also, some studies reveal that the reduction of animal suffering and the death is a strong driver of consumer acceptance. So it might be that the fact that to eat this meat, we don't kill any animals, could be kind of drivers of consumer, especially consumer who are sensitive to this topic. Because at the end of the day, we have to think about that not all the consumers are the same. We are individuals, we are different. So it might be some of those issues around it. Finally, we can say that what are the potential barriers towards the acceptance of cultured meat? Because we need to develop a product, right, that consumers like and are willing to buy, okay? So potential barriers are related to the perceived unnaturalness. So if you sell this product and say this meat that is produced in a bioreactor or in a lab, that people are say that's not natural, or at least the feeling is not natural. Also, we need to think about that one thing is what consumer perceive. That's not necessarily the reality. This is valid for many issues. Food safety concern. People say, is that food safe enough? People might be scared about it. Nutrition concern. Does this cultured meat contain the same nutritional compounds than conventional meat? Neophobia, especially food neophobia. New things. There are people who are more open to new things. The people are more close to new things. So this is valid for many things, especially for food. Distrust in food scientists and food safety authorities. Might be some people who don't trust food scientists, don't trust food safety authority, don't trust government. And we can see about the recent issue related to the COVID. There is a fraction of people who don't trust scientists, don't trust public authority. So this might be a concern. also, as was mentioned before about the impact on farming, there is also a possibility of economic insight about the impact of cultured meat. What we know that in many countries, for example, US, UK, or many other countries, the animal sector, it's one of the most important economic activity, right? So having cultured meat might be seen as something, a great competitor. So the kind of concern about this. There is also ethical concern about the use of many technology and perceived high price. So these are some, there are much more, many more of those things, but these are the concerns that consumers at the end of the day consider when talk about and think about cultured meat. Now move on to briefly present a couple of case studies. I've done more than that, but that's not, we don't have so much time today. The case study is based on measuring consumer willingness to pay. So why we use that? Why we measure consumer willingness to pay? Well, what we have seen in the literature is that there are many studies that investigate consumer preferences, but not many that measure the willingness to pay. Why we would like to measure consumer willingness to pay, which is a kind of proxy of quantitative measure of the preference of the consumer. Consumer can say, I like this product, but how much you like? Measuring that in the willingness to pay term, meaning in monetary terms, that give you a kind of magnitude of the importance of the consumer evaluation. Then, having those measures, it's useful to compare with cost of production. We can maybe know, we can estimate the cost of production per kilo. And so we can compare that with the consumer willingness to pay to see if there is a kind of economic feasibility. And also we can use this price as a kind of indicator, let's say, to suggest price of sales. So which price we need to sell, cultured meat to the market. And the consumer surveys that we did include choice experiment. Choice experiment, it's a kind of very popular methodology used to measure consumer stated preferences and willingness to pay for food products, but also for other kind of goods. I don't go much in detail on the choice experiment, but that's one of the most important methodology used to measure consumer preference. So first case study, Europe. So we did this study in 2020. We did a consumer survey using a choice experiment. We interviewed around more than 600 consumers in 3 countries, UK, Spain, and France. We focus the product that we have chosen is refrigerated and cooked fresh beef burgers. You can see a picture on your right. And we developed several hypothetical products. When we say hypothetical products, we mean that product that we design, that they are not products that are real. So we just imagine that. And this product were this burger, which vary for several attributes, like production method, could be conventional or cultured, having or not the carbon trust label, which is a measure of the kind of environmental, the carbon footprint. So how much is damaged the environment based on this production. The use of antibiotics, so giving the information to the consumer if the antibiotics were used or not, and price. So, and then we created a series of these called choice sets, okay? This is just an example of questions. So consumer in the survey get a series, let's say 12 of these choice sets, and you can see this product change, okay? Based on these attributes, and consumer need to choose, okay, one of these product, of these 2 products on the left, or just say, I don't want to buy this product. What we found? Well, we found that consumers generally reject cultured beef burger. So they basically prefer conventional meat, especially in Spain and France. France is much more reluctant than Spain, but there is not much difference. So you can see a negative price. So people prefer conventional beef, but that's very interesting. British consumer doesn't seem to have a preference for a conventional or cultured method. So that might be a promising market, at least at the beginning. So consumer they don't really care about how the meat is produced. Then we found that consumers prefer beef burger branded with the carbon trust label and also labeled with the claim non-antibiotic serum. Okay, this doesn't matter. This is valid for the conventional meat or the cultured meat, but this is something that is quite constant. And this is basically in line with studies in other food products. Okay, for other food products. So consumer would like products which are environmentally sustainable and don't contain antibiotics. Also, we found that there is a trend towards older consumers rejecting cultured beef more than younger. And also we found that consumers with high food technology neophobia reject more cultured beef. High technology neophobia means people which are strongly against new food technology, like GMO, or like cultured beef, or like food irradiation, or all the new technology. So this is quite in line with the findings that I showed at the beginning from the literature. But interesting, as we say that not all consumers are the same, this is the average data. But we identified several segments of consumer, meaning group of consumers in our samples, who were positive towards cultured beef. Almost 50% of the British, 38% of the Spanish, and 30% of French consumers are willing to pay higher price, okay, to buy this cultured beef burger. Okay, other consumers were indifferent or strongly reject. Okay, so this tells a lot of possible markets. Then we did a study in the United States. This is, I just showed today a part of the study, and I briefly mentioned at the beginning the other part. So we did this study when I was studying at the University of Arkansas in the US in 2007. Again, we did a choice experiment with 210 consumers. We used the chicken breast because this is one of the most sold products in the US and one of the most important chicken industries in the world. And again, we developed several hypothetical products using the same attributes that I showed before about the production method, the carbon trust label, the antibiotic use, and price. Okay, and these were an example, just an extract of what consumer evaluated. Okay, chicken products where you can change the method of production, the information about the carbon footprint, and the antibiotic serum, and finally the price. What we found here? Well, we found the consumer reject cultured meat over conventional meat. Similar to what we found for Spain and France for cultured beef. Consumers prefer chicken branded with carbon trust label and with the label with the claim non-antibiotic serum. Exactly the same result we found in the US. Consumers with high technology neophobia reject more cultured meat. And here we also found that religious consumers reject more cultured meat. We investigated that they're non-religious. So these findings are in line with what we found in Europe, especially from France and Spain, but also we can find that religion is important. It looks like that people who are religious tend to reject more cultured meat. Okay, so let's go to the end. So let's give some conclusions about what we have found. First thing to say, first we need to say that these results are hypothetical, meaning that this is only what consumers say about hypothetical situation, which could be different if it's a real situation, meaning when consumers taste the meat and can buy the meat, the result could be different. Unfortunately, we couldn't apply a real experiment because it's not possible, at least nowadays, to my knowledge in Europe and the US, to taste meat, cultured meat, because it's not available. So probably we should make a travel to go to Singapore to do this test. So keep this result a kind of hypothetical in that way. British market looks like to be a most promising market for cultured beef, while Spain and France for cultured beef and cultured chicken in the US might be a market are not really interested at cultured beef cultured meat at this stage. Meat should be branded with the carbon trust label with the claim on antibiotic server, because this could be good elements, good drivers for consumers to buy this product. Looks like that young and less neophobic consumer through new food technology could be the initial segments to launch cultured beef in Europe. While in the US, less neophobic consumer and those who are not religious, again, could be the initial target, consumer targets. So we know that when we make launch of new product, it's important to know which is the group of consumer we would like to focus the attention, would like to focus the target market, instead of launching the product to everyone to be more effective, right? We found that consumer evaluation for cultured meat is quite different, especially in US, Spain, and France, than conventional meat. This also means that consumer might have the right, so they to know that consumer is labeled differently, right? This is what we have seen before. So that's important. Another issue related to the labeling issues. At the end of the day, what we need, my suggestion is, we need to have more studies, consumer studies using real products, because only if the consumer has a possibility to taste the product, to look at the products, that might give more realistic information and what could be given to the supply chain of the producers. So this is a kind of forecast that we can say about it. Another thing to say is that, this is a bit of my conclusions, is that when we develop new product, this is valid for cultured meat, but or for all other products, we need to consider that there are 4 main attributes that for consumer are important when buy products, which is safety, nutrition, price, and taste. This has been investigated for many products from many different countries. So environmental concern, animal concern are absolutely important. But on average, consumer don't buy a product if it's good for the environment or it's good for animals, animal welfare, if the taste is not good, if it's too expensive, if it's not safe, for example. So that's something that I think it's important to highlight. Finally, the result that I presented today come from several papers. The first you can see on the left, it's a study that we did in the US with cultured chicken. I haven't presented all the findings here, but there we also investigated the effect of naming. So the fact that you can use the name cultured, lab-grown, on artificial can change consumer preferences. And we found that cultured name is much more accepted rather than artificial lab-grown. This is quite intuitive, but no study has investigated that. Then we had 2 working papers, one with Jean-François on the right, and now is under review, done in the 3 European countries. And finally, a study that I'm working in is already under review. A similar study did in China for cultured chicken that is again under review. And I haven't presented the results today because of a matter of time. So this is all from me. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you very much for this interesting talk. So there are a few questions, and I think one important is the following. Vegetable meat substitutes are performing far below expectations in the US. So what's about culture meat? It should be the same.
Well, I mean, it's, I'm not, well, I have some background in food scientist, but not the food scientist. So I think that the products are very different. So might be have some similarities, okay? The fact that they try to mimic meat. But from my understanding, a food scientist can correct meat. This cultured meat, theoretically, is real meat, right? It's not like plant-based meat, okay? Which is, different because you use vegetable sources to produce that, like I think legumes and so on. I know that these data about plant-based meat in the US are not going well at the moment. I don't know the reasons. There are many reasons that could be behind that. I mean, even the moment of related to the COVID issue might have an effect on that, on price and so on. So I strongly believe that might be some consumer that like plant-based and cultured meat, so could be an effect, but some consumer that probably don't. I mean, vegans, vegetarians have different preferences, so this might be a difference.
Okay. Do you know if there is any difference in acceptance according to the species, chicken, cattle, pig, or other species?
Well, having reviewed the literature, I'm not sure if anyone has done a study which compared these different kinds of species. So probably, I mean, consumers that buy beef or buy chicken usually are different. Could be also same, but different price. It might be some different to that. But what we found quite consistently is that the age, the neophobic towards new food technologies, that might be the main drivers of that. So, but conducting a study on comparing different species, I think it could be a good suggestion for future research.
Someone asked about how available the studies you mentioned are. So I think you have cited many papers, myself also. So I think in the slides you will see, or you have seen the different scientific references.
These are all available.
Yes. There are many questions about the price. Is this product supposed to be more expensive compared to regular meat? And how much is it? And when it will be mass produced, depending, of course, on its price?
Well, that's a very good question, because as I've said, I mean, price is a key determinant, right? The price, I mean, I think if people are interested and compare the price with, for example, the beef burger, I think at the beginning price should be quite similar. I mean, because if it's over a certain extent, as we have seen, that might be consumer not willing to pay. But this, of course, depends a lot of the cost of production. Well, I'm not an expert on the production on that, but I think that at the moment, I don't know the price of this cultured chicken in Singapore, but I suspect it might be very high. So the price, of course, should be a kind of comparable with meat or even lower. That also can boost a kind of more sales toward this product. But it's certainly a topic of importance. We can develop the best product that we want, but if the price is too high, probably there are not many consumers that buy it, and we can survive.
Okay, thank you very much. I cannot see any more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interesting talk.
Thank you, Jean.
Which covers many points. I suggest we can have a short coffee break because we are a little bit late. Maybe 10 minutes coffee break, if you agree. So it's for 3:15. I suggest to be back at 3:25. So in 10 minutes, so that we will be only 5 minutes late. Okay, thank you very much, and see you in 10 minutes. It's my turn to give a presentation, but for technical reason, I have recorded it. So it's a video. Of course, I will answer to questions after. So I think we can start the video to be on time and to finish on time. Dear ladies and gentlemen, this talk is entitled Culture Meat, is it possible, is it good, is it acceptable? This is the report of the workshop organized by the French Academy of Agriculture, the French Association for Animal Production, the French Veterinary Academy, and the French Society for Human Nutrition. And this workshop was organized on November 18 last year. This talk will be divided into 3 parts. Is it possible? Is it good? Good for the society, for our planet, for animals, for health? And at the end, is culture meat acceptable by consumers and by the society? Is it possible? There is a consensus about the problem to solve. Nowadays, the livestock and meat sectors are facing new and important challenges. Among these challenges, there are need for increased production of animal products to satisfy the increasing human population, coupled with a lower footprint, addressing social needs in terms of animal welfare and product quality for the consumer. Consequently, we should be innovative and we should be open to any innovation. This consensus was described in details during a workshop I organized in France 10 years ago. And nowadays, there is really consensus about these issues. The first culture meat was presented by Mark Post in 2013 in London, and the Professor Post said in 7 years, you will eat in vitro meat. And this is not the case yet. On August 5, 2013, Professor Mark Post of Maastricht University presented a burger made from culture beef in front of an invited audience in London with a lot of journalists. And this was acknowledged by the World Technology Network when Professor Post received the World Technology Award for Environment on November 15, 2013. However, this burger costed a lot of money. And we should recognize also that you have many private investors, such as Bill Gates and Rich Branson, who are embarking on the business with artificial meat. And they choose mainly to invest capital in the new Memphis meat company. Is it possible? Yes, because the cell culture is well known and can be used to produce meat, as some startups claim. And Singapore was the first state to approve a lab-grown meat product to be for sale to be in a specific restaurant. The California's new lab-grown meat facility is the most advanced in the world, and it was launched 2 years ago. And the world's first lab-grown meat factory just opened up in Australia, in Israel, and it can produce the equivalent of 5,000 burgers a day. On this map, you can see the geographic distribution of culture meat companies. 58 companies are represented on this map, but maybe today you have about 90 companies, mainly in the fish sectors. Most of the companies are in North America, also in European countries, and you have the company Mozamit, created by Professor Mark Post. The principles of cell culture to produce muscle are the following. You take a muscle sample from any alive animal, you extract stem cells or directly myoblasts, but stem cells can be converted into myoblasts, and myoblasts proliferate a lot to produce huge amount of muscle fibers. And the first burger presented by Professor Post was made using this process. You can also have pre-adipocytes and other cell types from stem cells, and you can co-culture these cells with myoblasts to produce a thin muscle, but much more organized. And this is a strategy followed by other startups. Finally, it's possible to work with cell lines, I mean immortalized cell lines, which produced an infinite quantity of cells, of stem cells. So in that case, you don't need a regular cell sampling from alive animals. So you can see on this slide that there are different technical strategies to produce a culture meat. But there is a consensus about the technical problems to solve. Current limitations across 4 domains have been described in different papers, and they concern cell line development, cell culture media. So in the medium, you have normally fetal bovine serum to provide hormones and growth factors. The current limitations also concern scaffolding because cells grow on scaffolds. And finally, the size and the type of bioreactors are mainly issues as well. So the great challenge is to efficiently produce culture meat products at scale. And this needs new concepts and bioprocesses that didn't exist before. The issues with culture conditions are the following. A great number of nutrients and hormones are necessary for cell culture because cells need nutrients and hormones to proliferate and to grow. Currently, in most research labs, stem cells are cultured in a medium containing antibiotics and for fungicides for safety reasons, as well as fetal bovine serum, which provides hormones and growth factors. But we need an animal component-free medium. The precise nature of the composition of the serum is unknown, but private companies are actively working to develop such a media. Scaffold material must be food safe, edible, or biodegradable, and derived from animal-free sources. A challenge is to produce in large quantities and in an edible way new media necessary for the culture of muscle cells. So compounds will have to be prepared by the chemical industry or genetic engineering, and maybe our environment might be polluted by waste generated by this process. The efficiency of the whole process in terms of outputs-inputs ratio is still unknown, so it's difficult to compare this efficiency of the efficiency of a conventional meat production. Is culture meat really meat on a biological point of view, or is it simply muscle fibers? So cells proliferate a lot, cell multiplication is very high, and at the end you obtain muscle fibers or a mixture of muscle cells. This process of multiplication occurs in the same way within any alive and growing animal. But at the end, you get carcasses and you collect muscles from carcasses, and these muscles should be converted into meat, and this is the process of aging, well done by the butcher. So muscle and meat are 2 different concepts. This is very important. And private companies are working to add missing compounds within the mixture of muscle cells so that muscle fibers can be similar in terms of compositions to real meat. So they need to add iron, vitamins, and other micronutrients. So during this process, this is mainly muscle, which is made and not really meat. Is it really meat according to EU regulation and consumers? Culture meat is considered a novel food by the EU regulation, and before it can be placed on the market, it should fulfill conditions related to nutritional value and safety. According to the American Meat Science Association, to be considered meat, in vitro meat must be inspected and considered safe for consumption and be comparable in composition and sensory characteristics to meat derived from animals. I mean, similar in composition, especially in essential amino acids, fatty acid composition, macro and micronutrients. If we ask consumers, is it meat or not, you have different types of answers. However, a majority of consumers think it is not meat. So we got this type of results with more than 5,000 answers, mainly from Brazil. In our survey, we also ask consumers about their willingness to pay. The proportion of consumers who want to pay more or much more culture meat compared to conventional meat is quite low, less than 10%. About 30% of consumers want to pay culture meat at the same price as conventional meat. And a large majority of consumers want to pay culture meat at a lower or much lower price, even nothing, compared to conventional meat. So this is a great challenge for private companies to provide and to produce culture meat at a very low price. The second section of this talk is related to the question, is it good? And the first item is it good for the society? In fact, we are producing 4-fold more proteins than we need. But the distribution of these proteins is not fair. Consumption of proteins is often too high, especially in developed countries. Meat doesn't bring only proteins, but also iron, micronutrients, vitamins, and also pleasure. So other solutions are available to provide enough food to human beings, and the culture meat solution should be compared to these alternatives. One alternative is to reduce food losses and waste, which represent 1/3 of our food production, which is huge. Please remember that we produce enough protein, but food losses and waste are very important. We have to revisit our livestock farming systems with more agroecology, and we have also to change our consumption habits by eating less calories and less animal proteins in developed countries. Indeed, a scientific group of my research institute calculated the recommended healthy diet in Europe. So according to this group, we should eat less calories, indicated by the red arrow, minus 10% on average, and we should eat less animal proteins from meat, dairy, and eggs, because animal proteins should represent half of our proteins and not 2/3 as it is nowadays. However, the recommendations vary across the world. It's not the same in East, Central, and South Africa. People living in these countries should eat more, this is the red arrow, and more proteins from animal sources, this is the green arrow. Is it good for our planet? There is a high demand for more environmental friendly food, and this is quite obvious. And climate and livestock is a political topic which is focused on deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions only. Many discussions about the real impacts of livestock on the environment, with negative impacts which are well known and positive impacts not well known, occur nowadays. So we should be aware of the positive impacts of livestock. Some fake news are regularly highlighted in the press media. For instance, it's claimed that we need 15,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef, which is not true. Only 4 scientific publications are related on the impacts of culture meat on the environment. And the last one concluded that due to the limited data, the studies are scarce, are based on hypothetical production processes. And there is a private report which also outlines uncertainties and limitations. So 4 publications is very low and clearly not enough to reach a consensus about the impacts of culture meat on the planet, despite claims by private companies producing culture meat. On this slide, you can see an example of discrepancy between different studies. All studies agreed that beef production needs a lot of land compared to poultry or pork production or in vitro production, in vitro meat production. However, according to MATIC, industrial energy used to produce in vitro meat is quite high compared to the study of Misto a few years before. So there is a discrepancy in terms of energy requirements. Is culture meat good for animals? There is a high demand from consumers for more animal-friendly food. And culture meat has the potential to avoid slaughtering many animals. Of course, if fetal bovine serum is not used anymore in the culture medium. Culture meat, which is sold in Singapore, is produced with fetal bovine serum. However, Mozambique and other companies are working hard to replace fetal bovine serum by an artificial medium, and they are quite successful in this area. But if we reduce the number of farm animals, what are the consequences of that? What will be the future of those animals? How will they be treated? What about positive impacts of livestock farming, which will be reduced? They include biodiversity, ecosystem, landscape, and so on. And these topics are rarely discussed. Is culture meat good for health? In a famous paper published in Frontiers in Nutrition and authored by scientists from America and Belgium, due to technological challenges, culture meat prototypes are currently not available for independent technological, sensorial, and nutritional assessment. And based on the available state of the art, it can be inferred that culture meat currently differs from traditional meat in its technological, sensorial, and nutritional properties. Culture meat tissues have often a pale color due to the absence of myoglobin. And this means a low iron content. And it's a real pity because iron is good for human health. It's a good attribute of traditional meat. Is culture meat good for health? In addition to what I said before, some consumers express some fears to be confirmed. For instance, the high-rate cell proliferation is likely to accumulate genetic alterations. There is also concern around developing canceroids and other undesirable cells from genomic alterations. So as a result, monitoring of genetic stability is necessary for quality assurance. And this has been discussed in different scientific papers. Of course, these fears have to be checked. Other important questions are, as I said before, what is the composition of the cultural medium, of scaffolds. Globally, there is a lack of transparency from private companies and many unverified claims. Culture meat is also likely to be a highly processed food product, which is quite not good because nowadays consumers prefer natural food products. In this last part of my talk, I will discuss is culture meat is acceptable. Firstly, is it acceptable for consumers? Many scientists agree that culture meat is a good option for consumers who still want to eat meat without compromise while protecting animals. But consumer surveys are often conducted by proponents of culture meat. Conclusions are fragile because consumers' opinions about a product which doesn't exist yet can lack of robustness. Globally, a low willingness to eat and to pay are observed. However, due to curiosity, a high willingness to try is observed, and this willingness to try is always higher than willingness to eat regularly. Sometimes consumers express disgust, which induces emotional resistance to eat culture meat, and this is the same for insects, for example. On this slide, you can see the demonstration that the required degree of changes is a driver of food acceptance. If you want to substitute plant proteins to animal proteins, it's quite easy. If you want to develop plant-based meat alternatives, it's a little bit more complicated, but those products do exist in the market nowadays. For culture meat is even more difficult because the required degrees in technology and in regulation are much higher. And this is the reason why an Australian scientist, Robin Warner, concluded that culture meat is already obsolete compared to plant-based alternatives. And on the opposite, many private companies would like to develop a mixture of plant and animal proteins to have new products on the market. Is culture meat acceptable for the society? We are going towards a wide range of alternatives to meat, including mixing plant and animal proteins, as I said before. We will have different models, different products, depending on the country. And the competition between all these products, which include culture meat, will be tough. Culture meat is presented as an alternative to intensive farming, but it's also presented as an alternative to livestock. So is it the end of livestock? This is a very important question because culture meat is supported by people against livestock farming systems. However, we need livestock to valorize non-convertible grasslands and core products. I mean grass, forages, and so on. All products that cannot be valorized directly by human beings, and they need to be converted into meat and milk by farm animals. The cultural and symbolic relationships with the rural world are also very important, especially in France. And also the question of dehumanization of food is important for some consumer segments. An important question is also the following. Is the control of our food by huge food tech companies of the private sector a good point in the future? I don't have the answer. It's just to put on the table the good questions. So in conclusion, it's not sure yet that culture meat could contribute to a sustainable diet. The definition of a sustainable diet provided by FAO in 2010 is based on 4 pillars. First, food should be safe and healthy. It should be good for the environment. It should be good on a socio-economic point of view and good on a socio-cultural point of view. In terms of safety and nutrition, we don't have data, precise data about culture meat to be sure that culture meat will be safe and healthy. Regarding the environment, no available data on the effect of culture meat production on biodiversity and ecosystems. And we have no consensus on greenhouse gas emissions and global warming of culture meat production. The cost of culture meat is still high at the consumer end. And if this cost will decrease a lot, and if culture meat will replace farmers, what about incomes of farmers in the future? Culture meat should also be in agreement with the gastronomic heritage of the populations. It should be accepted by populations also, but so far we observe a weak to average potential acceptance by consumers, because some consumer segments, such as people living in the countryside or older people, are reluctant to eat regularly culture meat. And some of them express disgust and emotional resistance. So this is the end of my talk, and please answer to our survey about artificial meat. You can scan this barcode and have access to a complete survey with about 30 questions. And we have already published results from this survey conducted in China and in Brazil. And we would like to collect data from different countries to have to be in a position to compare different opinions of consumers segments depending on the country. So thanks very much for your attention, and I am happy to answer to your questions. Okay, I have many questions in the chat. One concern future livestock, and one of you suggested that the two products can coexist. I mean, conventional meat and culture meat. And this is indeed a strategy which is developed by some startups, by some private companies. We invited 2 private companies in a meeting which was organized by the French Academy of Agriculture last November. And these 2 private companies didn't want to compete with traditional livestock, but simply to add a new product on the market. So in that case, there is no competition, but the consumer will have the choice between different products. There is another question about environmental impact. Impact, yes, there is a paper which was published by Oxford University, and they calculated the greenhouse gas emissions in the short term and in the long term, depending on meat production and consumption. And they showed that in the short term, there might be an advantage for culture meat. but in the long term, it's not so obvious because the production of culture meat would induce the production of CO2 and not methane. And as you know, CO2 lasts in the atmosphere much more than methane. But people of the private companies producing artificial meat said that in the future, the nature of the energy might be completely different. So it's very risky to calculate greenhouse gas emissions in the future after 100 or 200 years. There was a funny questions about using human cells. Is it we'll be sure that we don't use human cells. So I would like to say something funny. The lady who is in charge of the World Association in favor of animal welfare would prefer to use her own cells to produce meat from her own tissue rather than to eat meat from farm animals which have been slaughtered. So it's just for the discussion. So maybe I missed some question, but time is running, and there is also a question about animals feeding, which is very important to modulate the composition of traditional meat. So maybe on a theoretical point of view, it might be possible to modulate or to change the composition of the medium to provide more or less fatty acids or more or less micronutrients. The last question is about the future of farmers. Imagine the future will consume only culture meat. We will still need the farmers for lab-grown meat, yes, if the technology is based on muscle sampling and not cell lines, or maybe according to this person, we will need a zoo to keep animals. There is a question also about feed efficiency. So with an example for broiler, but to be honest, we ask the questions of feed efficiency and efficiency in general to the two private companies we have invited, and they didn't provide any good answer, any answer. Yes, it might be possible also to produce meat from different type of animals, lion or any exotic animals. On a theoretical point of view, it's possible. And to my knowledge, there are trials of co-culture of adipose tissue and muscle cells to give more taste to culture meat. And this is developed by a private company from Israel. And of course, if we need much less beef animals or meat producing animals, what would be the future of animals producing milk or eggs? Because as you know, there is a link between milk production and meat production as well, because at the end of their career, cows are slaughtered for meat production. So I think I did my best to answer to most of the questions, but maybe we still have 10 minutes to answer to questions to different speakers if we can have a general discussions. One person worries about the population in the countryside. which may decrease if culture meat is developed too much. It might be also an important question. If you have any answer to this, please go ahead.
Well, if I can say something, I mean, it's difficult to say, right? Because, I mean, already, well, we need to say why people move from the countryside to the city. I don't know if it's just related to the meat or not. It might be other components. I mean, certainly for the rural part already, we already know at least in Europe, many farmers already in the meat sector already disappear, right? So probably for economic and social reasons, so on. So I think it's difficult to give an answer related to that. Certainly, I mean, people which are less familiar with new technologies or probably also less educated in that sense might be more reluctant to cultured meat, which are more linked to the tradition, which means, I mean, related to factors related to lifestyles and so on. I mean, but I think it's difficult to know that. Might be subject for a study, probably.
I think there is a consumer survey in Ireland which demonstrated that, saying that people living in the countryside are more reluctant to culture meat compared to highly educated people living in cities.
Yeah.
I think in the different talks, we agree that there is a lot of research to be done about safety, nutritional value, and whatever, for the product to be on the market one day. I think it might be a great conclusion from today and from other papers as well. About consumer surveys, I think we also agree that conclusions should be interpreted with caution, that willingness to try is always higher than willingness to eat regularly. And I agree with you that depending on the survey, you have different, sometimes a few differences regarding the effects of gender or age or things like that. Consumer habits on the final conclusions, but it's quite normal.
Well, yes, I mean, I think probably one of the main issues is that to try the real products.
Yes.
Because these are always, you know, people in the survey sometimes say one thing but do different.
Of course.
Think about the organic sector. If you ask people, will you buy organic product? Yes, of course, but the market is still very small. So, I mean, what we really need, I think, at least for the consumer, is to try, have the possibility to try and taste the product and then see what's the real, opinions and behavior of the consumers.
I agree with you that if we provide more positive information about culture meat, it will increase potential acceptance. But it's the same for any type of product. For normal beef, it's the same. If you provide positive information about environmental impacts and so on, you will get a greater potential acceptance as well.
Yeah, I mean, even this is I got from the literature, reading articles on that. Also, other scientists point the fact that to focus more on the product, less on how it's produced, less on the technicalities. I mean, because it's also difficult to understand for, let's say, an average consumers, right?
Yes.
They don't. If you don't understand something, you might be reluctant, right? And so, if the product theoretically is exactly the same, I mean, focus more on the characteristic on the product and the benefit rather than how it's produced.
If I can make a comment on consumer acceptance, I have no information or data. That the key point, as you repeated, is the possibility to taste the product. I remember a study that we done when there was a great debate on the fat content in meat. And this debate was conducted with a panel of meat with different fat content, and actually the consumer realized that the fat content is a good part for the acceptability of the product. So without this this test, it's difficult to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we know. Well, I have done many different studies in the past with other products about sensory. I work quite a lot, and then it's quite well known that taste, appearance. Imagine that the cultured meat have a different color, right? Just hypothetically, that people say, I mean, they're quite shouldn't be, right? Because, or at least, I mean, again, even there are consumers. If you want to sell like cultured meat to people who are meat eaters, they probably look for a meat which is similar, exactly the same as conventional meat. But if you have, like, for example, think about vegans, vegetarians, people which are the opposite, because some people don't like the taste of meat, right? So it might be that you need to make a product very different than the other meat. It's really depending on the consumers, because I mean, consumers are different, and we all have different willingness to pay, preferences, attitudes. I think this is important to consider.
Yes, I appreciated the word of Professor Hocquette that meat is a pleasure. So maybe this aspect might be considered. Maybe eat a little less, but enjoy.
We discuss also in our workshop the question, is it meat or not? And there is another question, is wine without alcohol wine or not? And we discussed that a lot. So there is a parallel between these two questions, of course. And for marketing purposes, for to be honest, for honesty or reasons related to regulation and so on, we need to be very clear about that. What is the appropriate name? And some people said to the private companies, only for marketing purposes, you should not call this product meat, because it's different. And for your marketing strategy, it's better for you not to call it meat. So it's quite funny, but it might be a long discussion.
Well, I know that there has been, if I'm not bad, different studies, I think in the US or somewhere, that I think, if I'm correct, majority of the people don't want that this, even I think valid for plant-based meat, don't want to be called meat.
Yes, exactly. And because the consumers, in my understanding, have, how to say that, an image of what meat is, or what meat should be. And if it's different from this concept they have in mind, there might be a problem of, they might be disappointed or something like that.
We found the same thing. I'm currently working on plant-based eggs. We found the same thing. I mean, people don't want that plant-based eggs are called eggs. This is what the majority, at least, around more than 2/3 of the consumer would like to use other words. I think this is very important for regulations.
Yes.
For labeling and so on. I mean, and as well also for when you have to market the product. I mean, because name is important.
So this gives me the opportunity to answer to a late question, which relates to the conflict between artificial meat production and traditional meat. This person said, it should be not a conflict, but a synergy between culture meat and traditional meat. But in my understanding, the conflict is not between the two products, but it's more about the name of the product, about the marketing strategy, about the claims by private companies, and so on. This is very important issues we discussed today. Are the claims by the companies completely true, or things like that? So in my understanding, if there is a conflict, it might be in these issues, in these claims, in this advertising.
Yeah, I think you are right. I think even talking about the environmental issue, right, that we were mentioning, I read something that, I mean, also I think you confirmed that there is not sure. So, I mean, making a claim should be kind of regulated. I mean, should be proven.
Yes, exactly.
Because you can't mislead consumers, of course.
Exactly. Yes.
I think for the consumer side, I mean.
So it's a matter of great honesty of people speaking about this topic.
Yes, we need to have the instrument also to discuss. I mean, we need probably a real piece of meat, a real piece of culture meat to go ahead within this discussion at all points, I think.
So I completely agree with you, and it might be the conclusion of the webinar since time is over, except if you have more concluding remarks or something to say.
No.
Maybe
Okay.
we need to meet again in 5 years and try to give some answer to the question.
Okay, with pleasure. And at that occasion, we should meet face to face and to
Yes.
taste culture meat as well.
Yeah.
Well cooked beef, well cooked meat.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much to you
Thank
as
you.
many speakers, and thank you to the audience. It was a very interesting webinar, and I think we agreed more or less in general across the speakers. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And I would like to advertise again the next EAAP webinar on genetic solutions on March 15. So thank you to everyone. And so bye-bye and see you next time.